What if I told you that your mind operates on a frequency that only 1% of the population can truly comprehend? That the very thoughts racing through your head right now might be evidence of a psychological phenomenon that Carl Jung spent decades studying? Modern research suggests that many of these rare minds cluster around specific personality patterns, particularly the INFJ and INTJ types that Jung himself would have recognized. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll discover whether you possess one of the rarest cognitive patterns known to psychology. And trust me, the eighth sign will completely change how you view your own mental landscape. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what happens when who you truly are operates on a wavelength that seems alien to everyone around you? What happens when your mind processes reality in ways that leave others confused, intimidated, or simply unable to follow your thought patterns? According to Carl Jung, there exists a small percentage of individuals whose minds function in ways that are fundamentally different from the masses. These aren't just intelligent people, intelligence is common. These are individuals whose consciousness operates in dimensions that most people can't even perceive, let alone understand. But here's what's fascinating, and I need you to pay close attention to this. Jung discovered that these individuals often don't even realize how unique their mental architecture truly is. They spend years feeling like outsiders, wondering why conversations feel shallow, why others seem to miss obvious connections, why their insights are met with blank stares or uncomfortable silences. Sound familiar? Keep watching, because we're about to dive deep into the 8 unmistakable signs that your mind belongs to that elusive 1%. Sign 1, you think in patterns and connections others miss. Carl Jung discovered that certain individuals possess what he called introverted intuition, the ability to see patterns and connections that remain invisible to the majority of people. If you have this type of mind, you don't just see individual events or pieces of information. You see the web that connects them all. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this might explain why you felt different your entire life. When you're in a conversation, while others are focusing on the literal words being spoken, your mind is simultaneously processing the emotional undertones, the historical context, the psychological implications, and the future ramifications. You're not just hearing what someone says, you're understanding what they mean, why they mean it, and what it reveals about their inner world. According to Carl Jung, this ability stems from what he termed the collective unconscious, a deeper layer of the psyche that most people never access. Those with this rare mindset can tap into this reservoir of universal patterns and archetypal knowledge without even realizing they're doing it. Here's a test: when you watch a movie or read a book, do you find yourself predicting plot twists not because of obvious clues, but because you sense the underlying pattern of the narrative? Do you often finish people's sentences, not because you're psychic, but because you can feel the direction their thoughts are moving? If you're nodding along, you're beginning to understand why 99% of people find your mind incomprehensible. You're operating on multiple levels simultaneously while they're focused on just one. But wait, there's something even more profound about this pattern recognition ability that Jung discovered, and it leads us directly to the second sign. Sign 2, you experience reality in layers. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what happens when you naturally perceive these layers of meaning that Jung was referring to, while others remain stuck on the surface? If you have this rare type of mind, you don't just experience events, you experience the multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. When someone tells you they're fine, you don't just hear the word. You perceive the emotional undercurrent, the body language that contradicts their statement, the psychological defense mechanisms at play, and the deeper story their unconscious is trying to tell. This is what Jung called psychological depth perception, and it's exactly why most people can't understand your mind. While they're processing information linearly and literally, you're experiencing reality as a multidimensional tapestry. Here's what's crucial to understand, and this explains so much about your life experiences. When you try to share these layered insights with others, they often respond with confusion or dismissal. It's not because they're unintelligent, it's because they literally cannot perceive the layers you're describing. To them, your insights seem to come from nowhere, like you're making connections that don't exist. But Jung discovered something remarkable about individuals with this cognitive pattern: they often become bridges between the conscious and unconscious worlds. They can translate the symbolic language of the psyche into concepts that others can begin to grasp. Think about this: do you find yourself naturally understanding metaphors, symbols, and abstract concepts that others struggle with? Do you often communicate through stories, analogies, or examples because direct explanations don't seem to land? This brings us to an even more fascinating aspect of your unique mental architecture. Sign 3, you're drawn to the shadow side of human nature. According to Carl Jung, one of the most telling signs of a rare mind is an inexplicable fascination with what he called the shadow, the hidden, darker aspects of human nature that most people desperately try to ignore or deny. If you have this type of consciousness, you don't just acknowledge that everyone has a dark side, you're genuinely curious about it. You want to understand why people do terrible things, what drives destructive behavior, and how the human psyche can contain such contradictions. But here's what makes this truly extraordinary, and why it disturbs so many people. While others are content to label certain behaviors as simply evil or wrong, your mind seeks to understand the psychological mechanisms beneath the surface. You're not condoning harmful actions, you're trying to comprehend the human condition in its entirety. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Your mind naturally gravitates toward this process of making the unconscious conscious, of exploring the forbidden territories of the psyche. This is why you might find yourself drawn to complex, morally ambiguous characters in literature and film. True crime stories, not for the shock value, but for the psychological insights. Philosophy, psychology, and fields that explore the depths of human experience. Conversations about topics that others find uncomfortable or taboo. But here's the key insight that Jung discovered: this fascination with the shadow isn't morbid curiosity, it's a sign of psychological maturity and integration. You understand that to truly know yourself and others, you must acknowledge the full spectrum of human potential. Most people find this unsettling because they're still operating from a place of psychological splitting: good versus evil, right versus wrong, light versus dark. Your mind has moved beyond these simplistic categories into a more nuanced understanding of human nature. And this leads us to perhaps the most isolating aspect of having this rare type of consciousness. Sign 4, you feel like you're speaking a different language. Carl Jung discovered that individuals with this rare cognitive pattern often experience what he called psychological loneliness, the feeling that no one truly understands the language of their inner world. If you have this type of mind, you've probably experienced countless conversations where you felt like you were speaking in code. You share what feels like a simple observation, only to be met with blank stares or responses that completely miss your point. Here's what's happening on a deeper level, and this will explain so much about your social experiences. Your mind naturally communicates in symbols, metaphors, and multi-layered meanings. When you speak, you're not just conveying information. You're transmitting entire conceptual frameworks, emotional textures, and intuitive insights. But most people are only equipped to receive literal, surface-level communication. According to Carl Jung, this communication gap isn't a flaw in your thinking, it's evidence that your consciousness operates at a frequency that transcends ordinary awareness. You're like a radio station broadcasting in HD while most people only have AM receivers. Think about this: how many times have you simplified your thoughts just to be understood? How often do you find yourself saying, "Never mind," because explaining your actual perspective would require too much background context? This is why you might gravitate toward written communication, where you can craft your thoughts more carefully. One-on-one conversations rather than group discussions. Creative expression as a way to convey what words cannot. Silence, because sometimes it feels easier than trying to translate your inner world. But here's what Jung understood that most people don't: this communication challenge isn't a barrier to overcome, it's a doorway to deeper understanding. Your unique language is an invitation for others to expand their own consciousness. And this brings us to a sign that might surprise you. Sign 5, you're uncomfortable with pure logic. This might seem counterintuitive, but Carl Jung discovered that individuals with the rarest type of mind often feel constrained by purely logical thinking. If you have this cognitive pattern, you don't reject logic, you recognize its limitations. While others rely on linear reasoning and cause and effect thinking, your mind operates through what Jung called intuitive logic, a form of understanding that incorporates emotion, symbolism, paradox, and nonlinear connections. Here's why this makes you so difficult for others to understand. When faced with a problem, while others are creating step-by-step logical sequences, your mind is processing multiple variables simultaneously. You're considering not just what makes logical sense, but what feels right, what aligns with deeper patterns, and what honors the complexity of the situation. According to Carl Jung, this isn't inferior thinking, it's superior integration. You're not abandoning logic, you're embedding it within a more comprehensive framework that includes intuition, emotion, and unconscious wisdom. This is why you might 1. Trust your gut feelings even when you can't explain them logically. 2. See flaws in arguments that are technically sound but somehow miss the point. 3. Prefer creative problem solving to mechanical application of rules. 4. Feel frustrated by people who dismiss anything that can't be measured or quantified. But here's the profound insight that Jung discovered. This discomfort with pure logic isn't a weakness, it's a sign that your mind has integrated multiple ways of knowing into a more complete understanding of reality. Most people operate from either logic or emotion, thinking or feeling, rational or intuitive. Your rare mind has learned to dance between these modes, creating a symphony of understanding that sounds like chaos to those who can only hear one instrument at a time. And this integration leads us to one of the most powerful signs of this rare consciousness. Sign 6, you see through social masks effortlessly. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what happens when you naturally perceive the masks that people wear, the personas they present to the world, and the authentic self hiding beneath? If you have this rare type of mind, you don't just notice when someone is being inauthentic, you can see the specific ways they're protecting themselves, the fears driving their behavior, and the genuine person struggling to emerge from behind their social costume. This ability is both a gift and a burden, and here's why it makes you so incomprehensible to others. While most people accept social interactions at face value, your mind is constantly processing the subtext. You're reading micro-expressions, noticing incongruence between words and body language, sensing the emotional undercurrents that others miss entirely. According to Carl Jung, this perception stems from your natural access to what he called active imagination, the ability to see beyond the literal surface of things into their deeper psychological reality. But here's what's truly remarkable, you don't just see through masks, you understand why people wear them. You recognize the protective function of personas, the vulnerability that lies beneath defensive behaviors, and the universal human need to feel safe and accepted. This is why you might find yourself 1. Naturally becoming a confidant to others, even when you don't intend to. 2. Feeling exhausted by social situations where everyone is performing. Preferring authentic, vulnerable conversations to small talk. 3. Sometimes knowing more about someone's inner state than they know about themselves. But here's the challenge that Jung identified, this ability to see through social masks can create a profound sense of isolation. You're surrounded by people wearing costumes, speaking in code, and pretending to be someone they're not, and you're one of the few who can see the performance. This brings us to a sign that might explain some of your deepest struggles. Sign 7, you experience existential loneliness. Carl Jung discovered that individuals with this rare cognitive pattern often experience what he called existential loneliness, a profound sense of being alone in the universe, not because they lack social connections, but because they perceive reality in ways that seem impossible to share. If you have this type of mind, you've probably felt this deep, aching isolation that has nothing to do with how many people are around you. You can be in a crowded room and still feel like you're the only person of your species on the planet. Here's what's happening at a psychological level, and this explains so much about your inner experience. Your consciousness naturally gravitates toward the big questions: why are we here? What's the meaning of existence? How do we reconcile the beauty and suffering of life? While others are content with surface-level living, your mind is constantly grappling with the fundamental mysteries of existence. According to Carl Jung, this existential orientation isn't depression or morbidity, it's a sign of psychological depth and spiritual maturity. You're not content with shallow answers because your mind demands authentic understanding. But here's the profound challenge: when you try to share these existential insights and questions with others, they often respond with discomfort, dismissal, or attempts to redirect the conversation to more practical matters. This is why you might find yourself 1. Feeling most understood by books, art, or music rather than people. 2. Searching for meaning in experiences that others take for granted. 3. Questioning societal assumptions that everyone else accepts without thought. 4. Feeling like you're from a different planet when others seem satisfied with superficial explanations. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what happens when who you truly are seems to exist in a dimension that others can't perceive? This existential loneliness isn't a flaw in your psychology. It's evidence that your consciousness has expanded beyond the conventional boundaries of awareness. You're experiencing the vastness of existence while others remain focused on the narrow band of everyday concerns. And this brings us to the final and most profound sign of this rare consciousness. Sign 8, you're naturally drawn to transformation. Carl Jung discovered that the rarest minds are magnetically attracted to transformation, not just personal growth, but the alchemical process of fundamental change that he called individuation. If you recognize this pattern in yourself, you might be one of those rare individuals who embodies what Jung called the introverted intuitive, someone naturally drawn to the depths of personal transformation. If you have this type of consciousness, you don't just want to improve yourself, you feel called to completely transform who you are. You're drawn to experiences that break you down and rebuild you, that challenge your fundamental assumptions about reality, that force you to confront the deepest aspects of your psyche. Here's what makes this so extraordinary, and why it terrifies most people. While others seek stability, predictability, and comfort, your mind craves the chaos of transformation. You're not afraid of psychological death and rebirth because you understand that this is how authentic growth occurs. According to Carl Jung, this attraction to transformation is the hallmark of what he called the individuated person, someone who has integrated their conscious and unconscious minds, embraced their shadow and light, and become a complete human being. But here's the profound insight that Jung discovered: this transformational process isn't optional for minds like yours. You're not choosing to go through intense periods of change, you're being called to it by something deeper than your conscious will. This is why you might find yourself 1. Repeatedly drawn to experiences that others would avoid. 2. Naturally seeking out challenges that force you to grow. 3. Feeling restless when life becomes too comfortable or predictable. 4. Understanding that crisis often precedes breakthrough. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Your rare mind doesn't just accept this challenge, it embraces it as the fundamental purpose of existence. Most people spend their lives avoiding transformation, clinging to familiar patterns, and resisting the call to become who they truly are. Your consciousness operates from the understanding that transformation isn't something that happens to you, it's something you actively participate in as a co-creator of your own becoming. So there you have it, the 8 unmistakable signs that you possess a mind that 99% of people simply cannot understand. If you recognized yourself in these patterns, you're not alone in your uniqueness. You're part of a rare community of consciousness that Carl Jung spent his life studying and celebrating. But here's what I want you to understand as we close: your different mind isn't a burden to bear, it's a gift to the world. Carl Jung discovered that individuals with this rare cognitive pattern often become bridges between the conscious and unconscious worlds, translators of the symbolic language of the psyche, and catalysts for transformation in others. Your ability to see patterns others miss, to perceive reality in layers, to understand the shadow aspects of human nature, to speak in the language of symbols and metaphors, to integrate multiple ways of knowing, to see through social masks, to grapple with existential questions, and to embrace transformation. These aren't signs of being broken or different in a negative way. These are signs that your consciousness has expanded beyond the ordinary boundaries of awareness. You're not weird, you're evolved. You're not difficult to understand, you're operating at a frequency that invites others to expand their own consciousness. According to Carl Jung, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Your rare mind is both the vehicle and the destination of this journey toward authenticity. So the next time you feel isolated by your unique perspective, remember this: you're not alone in feeling alone. There's an invisible community of rare minds scattered across the world, each one grappling with similar experiences, each one contributing to the evolution of human consciousness in their own way. Your mind is not a problem to be solved, it's a mystery to be lived, a gift to be shared, and a doorway to deeper understanding for anyone ready to step through it. The question isn't whether you have one of these rare minds. If you've made it this far, you probably do. The question is, what will you do with this understanding? How will you honor the unique gift of your consciousness while finding ways to connect with others who may not speak your language but could benefit from your insights? Carl Jung discovered that the rarest minds often become the most important bridges between worlds. Your different perspective isn't a barrier, it's a doorway. And the world needs people who can open doors that others don't even know exist. Welcome to the 1%. The journey of understanding yourself and sharing your unique gifts with the world is just beginning. Thank you so much for staying with me through this exploration. If you found value in today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might benefit from it. And if you'd like to go a step further in supporting this work, you can now leave a super thanks below. It's a small way to say thank you, and it truly helps keep this channel going.